Who should pay when bulldozers plough kilometres and kilometres of firebreaks into your farm, leaving it unusable? That's the situation facing one family in Teapot Valley after the Nelson-Tasman fires. More than 2,300 hectares of land was destroyed by the bushfire, with thousands forced to evacuate from their homes for weeks. The Marshall family, who live next to the fire's boundary, returned home to find hectares of their land destroyed in an effort to stop the fire. Of the 41 properties affected by the fire or fire controls, the Marshalls is thought to be one of the worst. And almost a month later, they are still in the dark as to how they will cover the cost of repairs. Our reporter Katie Scotcher and visual journalist Simon Rogers filed this report from Nelson.
Simon Marshall, who lives in Teapot Valley, was one of the first to be forced out of his home by the raging Pigeon Valley fire.
There was smoke big time straight behind our house. It looked like it was close, but it was a bit further back than we realised, but it was fairly intense, and it was a case of trying to gather up the pets and some valuables and not be too long about it and get out. So yeah, it was you didn't really know what you had. It was pretty full on.
His mother, Pauline, lives down the road. She's owned a large section of land there for 24 years. Like Simon, she was one of the first to evacuate, leaving behind her home and paddocks of tinder dry grass. When she returned home 16 days later, the landscape around her was vastly different.
Well, it was a shock.
Kilometres of fire breaks, 50 to 100 metres wide, now run across Pauline's land.
They've just cut through wherever it was necessary to have them to stop the fires. They've gone through fences and water lines and paddocks, and it's changed the look of things considerably.
During the initial response, bulldozers and heavy machinery lifted earth to create a dirt road ring around the perimeter of the blaze to contain it. Fire crews are authorised in an emergency to enter a property and create fire breaks if it is considered necessary. Simon Marshall says that work has damaged his mother's land significantly.
Lost a lot of pasture, and there's been a lot of damage to water lines and irrigation lines and fences, so about 10% or maybe nearly 15% of the property. So to look at it, it's very different.
Pauline Marshall's land was lined with fences, irrigation and water lines for cattle. More than 300 dairy cows were kept on the land under an agreement with their owner, Michael Shearer. They were evacuated to nearby land in early February and still have not returned. For the 16 days Michael was away from the land, he was unable to supply Fonterra with milk.
We weren't able to supply because the shed we're milking out of hadn't been MPI approved recently. So we were just milking into a slurry tanker. But Fonterra's supported us financially through the times. The
lines and fences that are vital when farming the stock were ripped out of the ground as bulldozers ploughed through building fire breaks.
We've got half the farm that has good water on it still, at least. So that gives us enough of a platform to be able to carry on and milk on while the other half gets repaired. But really it's kind of a waiting game now till we get the okay to shift the fire breaks back and then can put all the fences and water lines.
Receiving the all clear to start repair work looks as if it'll be far away. The fire breaks must remain in place until the fire is completely extinguished. Then the Marshall family must grapple with the cost of repair work. Pauline's land isn't insured. She's owned farmland for 60 years and says it's never been needed. At this stage, she doesn't know how much it's going to cost to repair the land, but knows there is a huge amount of work to do. She's now waiting on her application to the Mayoral Disaster Relief Fund.
Well, it's going to cost a great deal of money to do all of this, and I don't imagine the Mayoral Fund will have that much money. So we just don't know yet. We'll have to wait and see.
There is just over $360,000 sitting in the relief fund. $170,000 of that is from the government. Simon says if they receive money from the fund, it may not be enough. So he's calling on the government for help.
It seems like some properties like this one have had a vast amount of damage done to them in the form of fire breaking, and it's not just to protect this property, it's to protect the wider community. So other properties further out haven't had any of this happen at all. So it only sort of seems fair that the government does come to the party and sort it out.
Simon says whether they receive funding or not, things need to be back to normal by spring.
It's imperative that this land gets reinstated and sown back down in the springtime so that the grass regrows in time before winter. So we'll have to make a move on it when we're allowed to.
The Nelson City and Tasman District Councils are yet to set a date for funding allocation. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Katie Scott Churaho.
The Tasman District Council says it's currently exploring other funding avenues apart from the Mayoral Relief Fund to assist people affected by the fire. It expects more information is likely to be available next week sometime.